So welcome to audiences joining here on LinkedIn and also people joining on YouTube to watch the stream later. This is an Ask Me Anything session about Storyteller Tactics, about how to tell stories about your work. And I wanted to start off with asking you guys a question, and that is, which sales story, which type of sales story do you think you're telling when you come to talk about the product or the service that you offer? Now, I'm going to guess, because 90% of the clients I work with are telling the same essential story, that I'm going to guess you've got to be telling one particular kind of story, which is fine, because like I said, 90% of people are telling that story. But maybe it isn't the right story, or maybe it's not enough story. Maybe you can go a bit deeper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the shape of the story, and it's not surprisingly relating to one of the cards in the Storyteller Tactics pack. Now, within Storyteller Tactics, you've got a number of cards, different categories of cards, but one of the categories has the blue outline around it, and these are structure cards, and they allow you to give your story a structure. And the simplest, not the very, very simplest structure to any story you tell about business is before and after. Before we came along, our customer was doing this. Afterwards, they're doing this. Okay, before and after. But there's a shape to stories, and the shape of stories, it does have an effect on us as we're listening to or reading your story, because stories have a certain shape. Therefore, we feel like we know what's coming next. So the question to you, and remember, you can put your comments and questions, this is Ask Me Anything, into the comment section, and I will come to them as quickly as I can and get through as many questions and answers as we possibly can. We've got 45 minutes today, so let's get through as many of your questions as possible. But what I also want to do is ask you that one question, which is, what is the main story that you're relying on when you come to talk to your customers about your product or service? Now, my hunch is that you'll be relying on one of these, which is a rags to riches story, and I'll show you why. Nothing wrong with it, by the way. The rags to riches story is the Cinderella story. It's the story of humble beginnings and a better outcome. So with the rags to riches story, it's easy to draw it as an arc. Okay, and essentially it looks like this, where you go, okay, it's going from negative to positive. So that's like your fortune over time. Well, you start off in a bad place and you end up in a good place. This is Cinderella and Rocky, and Harry Potter starts as a boy living at the Dursleys, and he ends the story as a full-grown wizard. So, okay, that's the rise story arc. And essentially, when you're talking about your product, your service, and your customers, that's a very simple story to tell, which is, you've got a problem, come with us, we've got the solution. Either through the product we sell or the service we provide, we will solve your problem. Okay, you can go a bit deeper with the rags to riches story arc, and when you go a little bit deeper, you realize that actually what customers are looking for, yes, they want to take a problem away, but deep down, what we're all looking for is recognition. So at this stage of the story, we're doing good things, but nobody can really see it. By the end, everyone can see. So if you were, for example, selling gym memberships, you go, look, there's a fit, athletic, healthy person inside, and if you spend 6 months in our gym, everyone will be able to see that. That's who you are. So there's something interesting there going on about kind of what's hidden inside us becoming visible to others. That's a kind of nice, satisfying way to think of that. And obviously, when you're talking to customers, you're trying to find out what's their inner motivation. What do they want inside? But anyway, the simplest version is, you have a problem, come with us, we've got the solution. Now, that's good. And as I said, I think that accounts, that is what we call it, like a rags to riches story arc. I think it accounts for probably 90% of business storytelling when it comes to sales. Because look, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a positive, uplifting, happy, optimistic story, and we like those. Okay. However, here's the problem. The problem is what if this sounds too good to be true? So what if the story you're telling, rags to riches, of you've got a problem, we can solve it? Well, what if I'm not quite sure that I believe you? Because I've heard this kind of thing before. Like I said, around 90% of business stories seem to be telling the same improvement story. So there's a danger that what you are saying or presenting as your rags to riches, come with me, we'll solve your problem, story actually sounds like this. And what it actually sounds like is a different story arc altogether. So yes, you're saying, you've got a problem, we can solve it. But what we're thinking is, oh yeah, really? That'll never work. That sounds too good to be true. That sounds like, the name of this story arc is Pride and Fall. Okay, and this is a story arc that we love. This is the story of somebody trying to be too big, too clever, and coming crashing down. So on the Storyteller Tactics version of this story arc, a very famous illustration, which is Icarus trying to flying too close to the sun, comes crashing down. So that's the danger of being too optimistic. You know, you overstretch, you overreach, you fly too close to the sun, you come crashing down. And this is a very old story. Well, Icarus is a very old story, but it's also the Tower of Babel. It's also, yeah, okay. You get the idea. Pride comes before a fall, and we kind of know this to be true deep down. So it's a modern story too. I mean, this is the story of Titanic. Yeah, this ship is unsinkable. No, it's not. Okay. So that's the danger of going too big on the rags to riches story, is that we're actually, don't think that's quite true. And look, we've all experienced this, where you look at a product, you look at a sales pitch for a product, and you just think, really? I'm going to get a six-pack in 6 weeks? Bitcoin is going to make me rich? Really? Well, maybe Bitcoin would have made you rich if you'd bought them 20 years ago, but anyway. So, what do? Well, be aware of it, first of all. Be aware that your competitors are all doing the same positive story, and your customers are all ready to be skeptical, because if you promise too much, we just don't believe it. It's too good to be true. No such thing as a free lunch. All these sayings in common use that we go, yeah, that doesn't sound right. So what do? Well, here's what you do. You get ready for a different kind of story arc altogether, one that goes like this. Okay, it's like a combination. So you start in a bad place, you try something and it goes okay at first, but then you hit a setback, just like Pride and Fall. But you don't give up, you persevere, and that's what allows you to recover. Now, I call this story arc, I call this story arc No Easy Way, because there's no easy way to do a good thing. And we know that to be true in life as well, because, sure enough, if something is good and easy, we're doing it already. Right. Therefore, you're coming along with a new product, a new offer, a new service, and saying it's good. And we're going, well, okay, but I'm already doing something that's, so this is better be better than what I've got right now. And it's probably going to be not straightforward, because things in life tend not to be. So that's a really interesting story to tell, that, yes, this is good, but it's not easy. Okay. And that's the story that a lot of businesses don't tell. It's interesting, actually. I had a conversation with a client who was an engineering consultant, and he is often called in by factories who have got production lines, and they want to know what's wrong with their production line. Well, he said it's different to that. He said what they usually do is they tell him what they think is wrong with the production line. Right? They think, we've got a problem with X or Y, and he thinks, well, you might do, but let me have a look. And then he goes in and he looks at the production process and goes, so you've tried to fix that, but it didn't work, did it? No. Okay, because that's your real problem is there. And so what's happened with that customer journey, that customer experience is, okay, so they have a problem. They try to fix it. They think they've done really well. They've fixed it. But no, they haven't, because it goes wrong still. And, okay, so the customer has gone, look, we've got a problem here. Here's our first quick fix. But, oh, actually, the quick fix didn't work. That's when you find the real problem and you fix the real problem. So you think about this in terms of if you're selling a story of expertise, this is your story. Because, okay, the first attempt to solve the problem, there's a problem. Of course there is, otherwise they wouldn't have called you in. Okay, so you got the first attempt to solve the problem is often a quick fix. Right, so you've got a problem and then there's a quick fix and then it doesn't work. And that's really, except this allows you to decide, to discover, you discover in the dip of the disappointment, that's when you discover the real problem. And that's when you, as the expert, deliver the real fix, not the quick fix. You deliver the real fix. And the real fix is what we're all actually looking for. The quick, we know is okay. So you notice this is kind of like a roller coaster, up and down, up and down. And what's interesting about storytelling is when you give your stories this shape, rise and fall, roller coaster, they feel more story-ish, and therefore they feel more plausible and more realistic and more credible than simply saying, imagine if your business story was, everything's great, not a problem, everything's going to be brilliant, we're perfect, fantastic, all positive. Just sounds too good to be true. I've watched recently some Apple product launches, Tim Cook era of Apple. So the most recent one where they launched those Apple goggles. And I was watching that process and thinking, this is relentless. Every single speaker at every single stage is just boom, 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 positive, positive, positive. This is revolutionary. This is radical. This is transformative. This is brilliant. This is just constant positivity. And it's like listening to a symphony that's nothing but high brass, trumpets and fanfares for an hour. Well, 2 hours in the case of Apple. You just can't handle it. It becomes painful to listen to, and we don't like it. And the same goes for the story. If it's just positive, positive, positive all the way, it doesn't feel real. And it discredits you as a storyteller to be looking like unrealistic. So the alternative is to go rise and fall. And the rise and fall allows you to talk about quick fixes and shortcuts that don't work out, and real problems that have to be discovered by going on the journey. Sometimes you don't know what the real problem is until you start trying to fix it. And that's what we know about from design thinking. Design thinking tells us this. Yes, half the job of a designer is to find the real problem. I remember when I was a journalist working in the BBC, I was very impatient. And in news, that's quite a good thing. Excuse me, in daily news, that's quite a good thing, because you're working to an incredibly tight deadline of minutes, sometimes, or hours. And you don't have time to mess around, and therefore you go for quick solutions all the time. And okay, that's fun. It's quite exciting. But when I got then moved out of news production into project management, and I'd be working on a project that maybe lasted 18 months, and I didn't have the skills for it. I was very impatient. I wanted action. I wanted results every single day. And that's okay if you're making a news program, because it's very formulaic and it's very short, and you do a lot of quick wins. But it's not okay if you're doing a culture change project across an entire organization. People are not going to change quickly. And so I didn't have the skills. I didn't have the skills to do this process and to go, I just wanted the quick wins, because that's what you do in daily news, quick win after quick win. And when we hit the setbacks, I was very yeah, really struggled to find the real problem and to put in the effort over the long term. But most things we do in life are like this rather than the quick wins, especially if you're involved in developing a product or building a company or running a team. You're not going to get many quick wins. So in the pack of Storyteller Tactics, and I'm keen if anybody wants to ask questions about anything else, then you're very welcome to. But in the pack of Storyteller Tactics, you'll find those 3 story arc cards. So the 3 are, that I've talked about, there's Rags to Riches, which is the optimistic, you've got a problem, we can solve it. But as a kind of antidote to that, it'll also show you how to tell a pride and fall story of, we think we're so clever, oh, maybe we're not. Now, these are good stories. It's good to know how this works. Well, A, maybe you want to avoid sounding like, yeah, this story. B, maybe your competitors, yeah, sound like this, and you can make fun of, you can make something out of that. Or C, maybe this is a good story for talking about how you learned a hard lesson. Okay, so it's quite a useful story, even though it's an unhappy ending. It's still quite a useful story. But then those 2 cards kind of come together, if you like, in the no easy way tactic, which is basically the kind of mature and that's the sort of story which is credible and long lasting, and yeah, you get the idea. Okay, so those 3 cards are there. What you'll also realize, if you haven't realized it already, is that just like the Hollywood film from the 1980s will tell you, this is the never-ending story, because, okay, you are trying in your project, whether it's to build a business or whatever, you're trying to get from A to B across a period of time, maybe a week, a month, a year, a decade. It doesn't matter. You're trying to build something over time, and you are not going to get there in a nice, neat, straight line. It's just not going to happen. What you're going to have instead is a series of roller coasters. Yes, so you're going to be up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. So you're going to have a whole series of these roller coaster moments. Okay. Now, what's great about this is, well, it's highly relatable. Yes, because we're all going through the same ourselves. And it also gives you little places where you can tell the story that you want to tell. So what you'll notice as you go through life on these roller coasters is every time you hit a setback, things don't work out as you'd hope they would, you will experience a negative emotion. Yeah. So frustration, anger, sadness, shame, embarrassment, all these kind of things which are negative emotions telling you that you're missing the target. But every time you get closer to your target, closer to your goal, yeah, you also experience positive emotion, which is fantastic. So, okay, negative emotion when you're not making it, positive emotion when you're getting closer. Well, that's great, because you can use that emotion to add some heart to your story. Yeah. I feel so proud of the team I work with when we did this together for the first time. Okay, well, that's a story with heart. Or I find it so frustrating that I can't achieve what I want to achieve in my job right now because I don't have the software that I need to do the job. Okay, again, there's a story there, and it comes from the heart. It comes from frustration. Okay, so that's a selection of the story arc cards that exist in Storyteller Tactics. And I think if I were to ask the question again, which story do you think you're telling when you talk about your product or your service to your customers? And my bet is that most of you will be telling this one, Rags to Riches. And most of you will be giving a Rags to Riches story. Okay. So listen, to the people who are watching live stream, this is your chance if you want to ask some questions, to ask about either the use of Storyteller Tactics or about how you tell stories about your work. We get all sorts of stories. I mean, I get all sorts of questions from people about about storytelling at work. And sometimes they are, well, why do we have to tell a story? Why can't we just give people the facts? And I think that's a very good question. And it's particularly important when you've got the facts, yeah, and that's your expertise. You've got access to data. You've got access to important facts that you've built up over a career. And you're thinking, well, why do I have to dress it up in a story? I'm an engineer. I'm not a storyteller. I'm an analyst. I'm not a storyteller. I'm a scientist. I'm not a storyteller. In fact, my job often feels like I'm the designated driver of other people. The marketing department are out there, coming up with all these crazy content ideas, and I'm the one going, yeah, but that's not data. That's just an anecdote. Okay, well, there's a huge importance, obviously, with grasping the facts. Having an understanding of the facts is massively important in any work, in any field, any work, any walk of life. So to be that expert, to have those facts, to have that understanding of the data is hugely important, particularly if you're predominantly dealing with things. Engineers deal with things more than if you're dealing with people, it's a little bit more nuanced because, excuse me, it's harder to get really good, solid facts when you're dealing with people. You can't measure people in the way that you can measure materials. So it's harder to get facts. You can still get facts. As any sociologist or social researcher will tell you, you can still get facts about people. But they're always a lot more complex than facts about things. Okay, so why can't you just give people the facts? Why do you have to give them a story? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. The first is to do with memory. And there's been all sorts of research published on how well we remember information. Now, I don't know about you, I don't know how good you are with your memory, but I know that if I have to go to the shops for more than 3 things, really, I have to make a list. I have lists, oh gosh, everywhere. I mean, I've got so many lists in my notebooks of stuff that I've got to do, because otherwise I just don't remember to do it, and that's just a disaster. So I have to make lists, and I'm constantly ticking things off lists because my memory isn't that good. Okay. Now, if you asked me for the facts about a career in television journalism, which is what I did for a living before I became a storytelling consultant, well, that's going to be pretty difficult, and I'd have to do a lot of thinking, digging, and researching to give you the facts about television journalism. But if you want me to tell you a story about it, that's easy. I can tell you all sorts of stories about the highs and lows of being a television journalist. Okay, so that's because they're easy to remember, they're easy to recall, because they usually involve a strong positive or negative emotion. Yeah, and the emotion centers of the brain are very, very closely linked to the memory centers. So that's the main reason why you should consider storytelling rather than just giving people lists of facts. Is we're not very good with lists of facts. We don't really remember them in the same way as we remember emotions. And emotions are best conveyed in the form of stories. So that's the first reason. There's even research, I mean, I've seen a statistic, I haven't read the original research, but it's been quoted many, many times, that our recall of facts is up to 22 times better if those facts are contained within a story than if they're just given to us in a list. Now, as I say, I haven't read the original research for that. I believe it. It sounds about right, but 22 times, who knows? But I think it's without a doubt better. And if you want to just check this, just test your own memory and think about, okay, what are the facts that you learned last week? Okay, then think, what TV did you watch last week? What soap operas did you watch? What novel did you read last week? And who was doing what in those scenes that you were consuming from fiction? And the answer is you'll remember an awful lot more of the fiction than you'll remember of the factual content you learned. That'd be my guess. The second reason why I think you do need to think about storytelling, even if you're dealing with getting facts across to people, is because who are you anyway? Now, might seem like a rude question, but who are you and why should we trust your facts? That's a really tough question. Now, you might think, well, I'm a doctor. I've got a stethoscope around my neck. I've got a medical degree. Therefore, when I tell you about the risk of smoking, right, you better believe me. Because, okay, no, that does kind of work, actually, for some people. So doctors, you got it made. We generally tend to trust them. Although, interestingly, not everyone trusts doctors when it comes to new drugs or vaccinations. Okay. But for everyone else who we don't know, like personally, we have no reason to trust you. So when you tell us about your product, you tell us about your service, you tell us about what it is you make, and you make a promise, right? And you make a promise that this will work for me, the customer. And part of me is thinking, okay, maybe you've got some facts, but maybe you haven't, or maybe you've got some, but not all of them. I don't know. I don't know the full picture. I've got to make a prediction. I've got to make a bet on you and think, right, okay, I'm going to trust this person. And I don't think we trust facts so much as we trust the people who give us the facts. So your family doctor, the doctor who you've seen for a long time, yes, can give you facts in a way that the director of public health, a doctor who you've never met before in your life, standing on TV, you might not feel the same way. So that's actually about character. And a character, a person who says one thing but does another, right? Well, that behavior is undermining trust in anything that person does. So if you're great classic examples, during the pandemic, there was those cases of people who were involved in the public health response to the pandemic, who insisted that there should be lockdowns on social activity, who then got caught breaking lockdowns to go off and see their mistress, or to go off on holiday, and having a party and broke their own lockdown. Now, arguably, the information, the facts about lockdown were not changed at all by the behavior of the characters in those stories. It made no difference. Lockdown was either a good idea or a bad idea. In my opinion, it was a terrible idea. But there you go. But none of that changed because of the behavior of the public health official who drove and broke lockdown to visit his mistress. But that guy had to retire from public life and stop giving advice on lockdown because he'd acted so out of character that nobody would believe him anymore. So there you go. So what stories are doing, well, what we are doing in life, whether we're consumers, colleagues, whatever, what we are all doing is reading people, trying to figure out two things. First of all, can I trust this person? Second, what's this person going to do next? Okay. Usually we're also thinking, what does this person think of me? Okay. It's very hard to get that into a factual state. What are the facts for trust? What are the facts for motivation? What's this person going to do next? What are the facts around what this person thinks of me? There aren't any. There aren't any. All you've got is feelings. Okay. And the place in which you capture character, the place where we talk about character, the place where we explore motivation, intent, trust, we explore all of these through stories. And stories are, so the great, the classic story is this person in power says you should do this in public, but in private does this. Well, that's a great story. That's, by the way, a downfall story arc. Yeah. In public, this person is like this. In private, they're like this. Oh, we like that story. We do like that story. So story in story, we're reading character. And it's not a factual matter. You can't say, in fact, this person is a good character. You're saying it's an opinion. And it's an opinion based on stories you've heard about that person. Well, sometimes it's based on prejudices and stereotypes as well. But essentially, those are just kind of out of focus stories. Personal stories are strong focus. Stereotypes are kind of out of focus, but they're still stories. Okay, listen, I've been talking now for half an hour, so I think that's kind of getting enough. So what I'm going to say to people who are live streaming, watching on LinkedIn, is if you want to ask a question about your business story, now is the time. Because if there's no questions, I'm not going to carry on. I'm just going to wrap up, because half an hour is pretty good. If you would like to ask a question, please leave a comment right now. If you are kind of just curious, I'll tell you what I'll do. In the comments below on LinkedIn, I'll put a link to those 3 story arcs we talked about before: Rags to Riches, Pride and Fall, No Easy Way. And so in the link, you'll be able to read the content of the cards for yourself and see whether or not you are in fact telling mostly Rags to Riches stories. I wouldn't be surprised if you are. And then see whether in fact you can switch to a more subtle, No Easy Way story that feels a bit more real, frankly, and a bit more trustable than just giving us Rags to Riches. Okay, well, I think that's good. I've done just over half an hour, and I think that's a good place to stop. If you add comments below after the event, I'll answer them. So I'll answer questions, but once the live stream is over as well. Thank you very much for watching. It's been great to talk to you. I hope you found that useful. Remember the deck of cards, should you be interested. I gave you 3 cards from the storytelling deck. Look, there's 54, a total of 54 cards in total, covering a lot of aspects of storytelling. So there's a lot of advice. There's 20 years of journalism and 10 years of training gone into that deck. So do check it out. A lot of people say they find it very, very useful. That's what I like. Okay, thanks, folks. Good to see you. Leave questions in the comments. I will answer them. And yeah, take care, everybody.